Hi everyone, welcome to my session this morning, day 13 of M365 May. It's been a crazy schedule, but so much good stuff happening. Just go through a couple of introduction slides. So we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this online conference is hosted, and the traditional custodians of the lands where our Australian-based speakers and participants are located. I also like to pay our respects to elders past, present and future. We also welcome our New Zealand friends, and on behalf of M365, I'd like to welcome and acknowledge our speakers from New Zealand. We have a code of conduct which applies throughout the whole month and for each session. There's a short version on the screen. There's also a longer version which you can go and read if you need to. For me, it's fairly simple. Be constructive, be respectful, helpful, and be kind. So who am I? My name's Errol LeBoydre. I'm a principal director of a company called Wirelink, and we do solutions and services predominantly in information management space in Australia and New Zealand. I've been doing IT and technology for most of my life, and I must admit it's a bit of a hobby for me now, which is a bit sad, but nevertheless, technology is a fun thing. I'm a husband. I'm a father of a bunch of kids who are now all growing up, which is kind of cool. I'm also a granddad. These are my two grandsons. So I like to show off. Just amazing humans. I've missed them heaps over this ISO period, but had a lot of catch-up connections across the technology. So the agenda for this session, it's fairly simple, but we're going to cover a fair bit in a short time frame. It's all about streaming analytics. And streaming analytics is one of those objects in Azure. So it's a little bit technical, but there's going to be a business or a logical reason for the session at the end. If you stay with us, we will show a fair bit, which you might seem a little bit daunting for some. But if you're in the space already, then I'm sure you'll be fine. So what is streaming analytics? What can we use it for? We're actually going to build a streaming analytics project in Azure from start to finish. And that's a little brave given the time frame, but I'm confident. It's a bit of a testament to the portal if we can do that fairly quickly and get a result. We'll stop and we'll do our cue card scan. So get your cameras ready when it comes to that, and then we'll apply streaming analytics to a real world scenario to see how it applies and to see why it has value to an organisation. Towards the end there, we'll have some questions and answers, and any feedback will be welcome. Okay, so streaming analytics, and it seems complex, but I guess if we think of it first of all as just another service offering in the Azure stack. I like to show this to people, and there's different versions of it, but in the end, Azure as a ecosystem has got so much stuff in it, and it's very important, Azure, to the 365 Office type products as well. It's very connected. So as you can see in the Azure stack, we've got things like machine learning, we've got analytics. Compute just means our machine, our virtual servers, etc., databases of various types, development, and so on. And we get down the line to how we can actually provide identity, protection, etc., IoT, and it goes right down. Networking, of course, things need to join together. Storage, where do we put things? How do we run things? And what do we do with them? So we're going to focus on this block here primarily, which is streaming analytics, one small block in the whole thing. But it's also going to relate very closely to event hubs, and we're also going to look at Power BI, and we're going to look at function apps. And so there's a few things in this end-to-end discussion that we'll actually cover off. Now, what's cool about this diagram is that a lot of these objects, they just naturally work together, and that's the secret. This is like pieces of Lego, I guess, in your building block drawer. So all the colors are like pieces of Lego. How do we build that Lego up into something that makes sense for us? For example, if I've got streaming analytics, and when we go and see this in more detail, could I then apply some machine learning? or cognitive searches or cognitive services? Well, absolutely. It's called like a first-class citizen type arrangement where streaming analytics, event hubs, and all of these other objects, they naturally fit together well without too much effort from the people building it. So streaming analytics at a high level is fairly simple. There's data that comes into it. There's the streaming analytics itself, and then there's things you can do with it. So there's inputs, the analytics, and the outputs. That's the first thing to think about that. Not too complicated. So from an input side of things, what can we do? Okay, so streaming analytics joins naturally to, like I said before, event hubs or storage or IoT hubs. So these objects here in the middle here, they are natural, I guess, staging areas for data. So to get data in, there are many ways of doing that, and we're going to have a couple of examples, but any data that looks like it's log file type thing, events, custom data, anything that is small message based, we can bring that into any one of these three. Once we do that, the streaming analytics will actually understand that it's been ingested, and then we can do a bunch of cool stuff. We can actually manage that data, and we can analyze it, and we can then reroute that data into different business needs. So quite simply here, a data coming into streaming analytics could then go into Power BI. It could go into other storage areas for long-term analytic storage, or it could go into databases, or it could go into portals for better visualization. I'm going to try and cover as much of that as we can today in one session. Just a couple of architecture models, and this is simplifying that last slide. Event hubs. So we're going to bring some data into an event hub, and I'm going to create that event hub. We're going to create a new streaming service, an ASA. When you see that, that's just Azure Streaming Analytics. That's a nice icon, wavy, streamy thing, stream, water, and then Power BI outputting. So we are going to, in this sample that we're going to build here, I'm going to spin up an application which simulates data. I'm going to create a new event hub. I'm going to put the data in the event hub. I'm going to create a new streaming analytics project, which is then going to ingest that. We're going to write a query and then output that to Power BI as a live feed. Just another option on here is from what we could go to Power BI, or we can go to another event hub for different processing. We could then go to an alerting scenario with emailing, or we can go to this icon. If those who don't understand that, is what's called a function app. A function app is a pretty cool thing. It's all part of serverless, so we can write code as a function app, and to have processing happening on the Azure platform. Very consumption based. So if you use it once, you pay for it once, as opposed to creating an entirely new project and spinning that up. Okay, so let's get into this. Let's have some fun. So on my screen, I've got two browser screens in my Azure portal. One is just at the base portal there, and this one here is already in the Service Bus portal. So like I said before, we need to actually get data into an event hub in order to process it. Now, I don't know if any of you are familiar with this particular view or not, and it doesn't really matter if you're not. It's not as scary as it might look. If you are familiar with it, then you're already making coffee or having a wander around. But this is essentially the Azure portal where we can then go and work all of those objects that I showed you in that big slide. At the moment, in this event hub namespace called Service Bus, I've already got some event hubs happening, and a couple of these are running live already. So let's do that. Let's create a new event hub. I'm going to call it M365 May, because that's relevant. We can create partitions in an event hub. For those who are a bit data orientated, as you can imagine, if we're bringing in millions of events, into a bucket. If you can partition that off, then obviously we get better performance. For this scenario, it doesn't really matter. Now, this is fairly important. This is retention on our Event Hub. The reason why it's important is because it shows that the Event Hubs aren't designed to store data for long periods of time. They're not long-term storage options. It is really just a staging area. So for this scenario, the message retention is 1 day. So we can ingest thousands or millions of events into this Event Hub, and every day it gets cleaned out. It just doesn't build up and get clogged up. We can leave that off, create. Okay, so this is going along. So now we have a new Event Hub in Azure called M365 Main. So if I click on that, open it up, obviously there's not going to be too much happening because there's nothing going into it. So for my little application that I've got that actually is going to push and simulate data in, it's actually a Microsoft provided one from GitHub, so it's not something I wrote, but it simulates a call center, a telco call center. So we're going to simulate the input of thousands of call center type messages with some relevant information. The crux of the project is that we're going to do some detection, some fraud detection on those calls and on those events, and we're going to actually recognize when something is fraudulent. We're going to do that because if we've got the right information on each call, and a call is made where geographically it simply can't be true, then we can detect that. And this is one of the features of streaming analytics, the ability to do analysis. It doesn't have to be as complex as doing analysis, but it's what it's good for. So in order to punch this data in from application, I need to create a config file. So I need to be able to connect to it. I can't just connect to it willy-nilly. My config file I'll call Mo365 for want of a better term, and I'm going to select manage. So because manage is selected, that means I can actually input and send events to this Event Hub. I could actually just listen for that as well. So I could have an application that listens for data going into there. So let's click OK. We'll create. Now I have a connection policy and I've got a connection string. Now just 2 seconds, I actually need to input that connection string into my application. So I need the Event Hub name, C. Just doing this off screen. It's lots of code and stuff. I'm going to copy my string and paste it. Now, I don't know if anyone is going to go and grab this and have a play with it. And I might just bring this up and show you. There's a bit of a trick here. If you're following along with the project, and it's available on the Microsoft, I'll get you a link for that later towards the end. When you go and connect that connection string, it would seem logical just to paste it, but make sure you remove this last part of the connection string. Otherwise, it won't work if you're using the same app and following the same pathway. Okay, so let's close that. Let's go and I'll bring up this. I'm now going to see. I'm going to run this application up, and as I do that, you'll see it's going to start simulating a whole range of data going in there, and it's random data, obviously. The application input is set to be able to change the actual data, so you can simulate that. I've already said that. Okay, where's my? Okay, so we're going to spin up this little application. We're going to create 1,000 messages a minute, and we've got this degree of fraudulent setting. Okay, so now you can see this application is generating this simulated telco data, simulated phone numbers, locations, and all this stuff. And you can see that's moving quite quickly and successfully. So at this point, our event hub is now receiving data, and you can see fairly quickly with our metrics, we've got some numbers happening. 1 hour. Let's change that to 1 hour. Yeah. So, okay, our first steps are done. We've got an application simulating data. It's not really massive data, but still it's good enough for us to do some testing on. So that bit's done. Now we're going to create a streaming analytics job, and we're going to connect to that event hub. Streaming analytics. Got a couple that are set up here already. One stopped, one running. Add a new job. Once again, we've got to give it something relevant. Going to put it into a subscription. I've already created a resource group for this. Resource groups are just logical batching of objects and solutions in Azure. Yes, I did. There we go. Locations, obviously very important for performance. We're going to pick Australia East because this is where I'm running. Hosting environment is in the cloud, but we could actually develop the streaming analytics job to be on the edge. What that means, it really can sit in an IoT component and provide analysis services in an IoT component. Now, that's a whole different discussion, but very cool. And create. Okay, we're off and running. We're probably about halfway there, and we're doing well for time. Go to resource. So now I have a streaming analytics jobs, and as I showed you at the start, the basis of what this is inputs, queries, and outputs. That's what it's all about. So we need an input. We need to actually connect to that event hub so that we can ingest the data in. Add streaming input. As per the diagram I showed you, I can have a hub, an IoT hub, or a blob storage. The difference between an IoT hub and a normal hub is IoT hubs are just a different component base. Essentially, it's the same thing. It's a storage area for events. Input. I need to actually find the hub I created. It's under the service bus. I'm going to create that one there. We just recognize, and we can leave the rest. We can leave the rest alone. So out of the box, what it says is, hey, we understand that this data is going to be a JSON format, but we could then change it to CSV, and we could also create our own proprietary format to ingest it and recognize it based upon the schema. So let's save that. That will take a second. While we're still developing these inputs and writing our query to go to an output, the job itself is actually offline, so it's not started just yet. And if we try to start this now, it would fail because we haven't got the right pipeline of data from start to finish. Input. So we now have inputs happening. Yep. Clicked on that. We won't have data just yet. Okay, so we need now to write a query. Now this is where the fun begins, because all this data that's happening, it's different segments of the data. It's got different reasons for where you put your output. So the query is how we say, hey, I need to know this, send it there. And when we come down to our live presentation, sorry, live application and our real world scenario, this becomes really important because this is where we design our rules base. So an event happens, I write a query to recognize that event and then perform an action. as you can see here, the data that our little application is pumping, and it's happening, it's going crazy. We can see some samples of that already. Okay, here's our countries. We've got file names, we've got a bunch of stuff there, call numbers. It's all simulated, of course, times, etc. So if I had a call from a number in Germany, and then I had a call from the same number in America with a minute apart, that's got to be a fraudulent call. You can't do that. You can't get there fast enough. So in the interest of time, I've got a query that I'm going to copy and paste. Let's post this in here. So this is a query, and I need to change that. I didn't call my input that. Input. Okay, so now that's happy. So this is a query, and it's using a tumbling window. So we can actually write this a streaming analytics query language. And I'm not a data scientist now, but you can get really cool and funky with some of these queries as to how you actually output your data. So by having a group by tumbling window, effectively this is going to be a live stream, but it's based upon a timed aggregation. So over a second, do some stuff, count the fraudulent calls, set my time frame there, and then between 1 and 5 seconds difference, yada yada. Right, so this is my query that's going to determine fraudulent calls and then output those as a live stream. Let's save that. 2/3 of the way there. How's our time? Good. So far, so good. So the next thing we're going to do is we need to actually output this into something that we can see. And the best visualization way to do this is obviously to bring it into Power BI. And let's see the result from my application, pumping data in, analyze it to look for a fraudulent scenario using a query and a tumbling window, and then visualize. So let's go to output. Output, so as per the diagram I showed you before, there's a number of things we can do with outputs. We can actually send data to a database. We can move it into a data lake storage for long-term analysis, table storages, all these things that make a lot of sense. Cosmos storage, etc. So we're going to pick Power BI because it just looks cool. Now Power BI is going to ask me to authorize into my Power BI environment so that it can send a data set into that so I can use. Call it output. Again, leave that as that. I need to give it a particular name. Let's find that, otherwise it will struggle. It doesn't really matter. Data set name May 365. Actually, wrong. It's got to be a table name. V, because of, let's go to here. So these are my groups under Azure. It's asking to drop it in there. Data set name. Okay, I think that's going to work. Yeah, so let's also then select user token because I've already authenticated in. And as you can see, I'm in the Azure portal. I'm in streaming analytics space, and I've now just authenticated to be able to push a live data stream into Power BI. That's the advantage we get by building things into that building block and that Lego pieces type scenario. Output. Now I need to check something. I've called this output. My query needs to also send it into output into, yeah, you see I can change that. They have to match up. and save. Okay, so look, I think we've got our input, query and output all done. We need to now start it, hold our breath, say a little prayer to the demo gods, and we'll see what happens. Just need some holding music here. While that's starting, what I might do is show you something. So we talked about that query that was a tumbling window. There are some built-in streaming type queries that allow you to do different things based upon your needs for streaming. We can do tumbling windows, which is the one I grabbed, and it's just got predefined window lengths, goes one after the other. Within that window length, we can do some aggregation, or we can do some numbers of something, and then it just keeps going. And there's this concept of hopping windows, sliding, and session windows. Like I said, I don't pretend to understand why you use those. And if there's anyone want to put their hand up, I'd be happy to take that. Okay, this is still cruising around. You just start getting ready to create something in Power BI. Okay, so this is done. This is successful. It's running. That's cool. So what we can do here straight away is this is now an end-to-end pipeline. Can I test the query? Not yet. Data's still coming through. This looks better. So from within the Streaming Analytics portal or Blade, now that we're running and it's ingesting, we can quite literally just test this query and see what output we get. So while that's happening, here we go. Great. So this query is outputted some fraudulent calls. So each one of these entries is a tumbling window of a period, and this is the count, the number of fraudulent calls that we've done because of this condition here. Okay, so that's great. We know that works. Come across and let's now log in. Let's see if we can actually get something live and streaming. Now I'll put this against my stuff. My stuff is exactly that. My stuff. Dashboard. Let's create a new dashboard. Dashboard name. I'm going to have a lot of these M365 May objects around the place. Okay, blank dashboard. Add a tile, and a tile custom streaming data. So this is just made to work. Next. Next. Card added value, fraudulent calls. Okay, so here we go. This is a live card because I've selected card with fraudulent calls, and this is the count. So if we go back to our query, right, this is like this, we're counting the calls here, but as this tumbling window moves along, the count of fraudulent calls is going to change, and that's why that's changing. Next. And we can just go next. So that's okay, but it's not as cool as we can get it. Let's go do it again with the same data set that's streaming live. Bang. Now let's make this one a line chart. And let's make that access window end. Let's make the legend, value will be fraudulent calls, and let's make this 5 minutes. Next, apply. Okay, so that I'm pretty happy with that. So for every period of this tumbling window that's assessing the data coming in from this application now, which is dummied, For every one of these, we are getting a changed result as it pushes through. And that's live from streaming analytics, from a dummy data, from event hubs. Now this is an application you can go and grab and follow and set up yourself, but I think that's a very cool visualization. But hurry on, time is starting to slip. Okay, so this is the stage where I need you to scan the QR code. And I just want to acknowledge the fact that our sponsors who have been very generous for this event, they've provided a bunch of goodies and a bunch of fun stuff. And without sponsors, it really is very difficult to put these events up. Considering that it started out being as a Saturday and now it's a month of presentations and sessions, as well as the sponsors. Sponsors wouldn't happen if it wasn't for the people that set it up and ran it and managed it. And for those guys, big kudos, because we know how much work goes into this and we're thankful. Okay, so here is our week 3 QR code. Now get your phone out, do a quick screenshot of that, so QR capture of that, and good luck. We'll just give you a minute to do that and get it done. I have no idea what the prize is for that, but I'm sure it'll be good. Okay. So good luck. So demo. So I'm now going to talk to you a little bit about, and this whole session was about turning a real application into an event monster. Event monster might be a little bit of an overkill, but nevertheless, I'm going to talk about a scenario where we have an application that really does sit alone in the enterprise, and while it does a good job, getting it to connect and getting it to integrate and getting it to actually become more flexible has been a little hard until now. So as I said before and earlier in the start, with Wildlinks, we provide services around information management spaces. But one of the products that we work with to achieve the stuff that we do is a product called Micro Focus Content Manager. And that sits in their secure content stack of Content Manager and unstructured data, control point, etc. The Content Manager, it does a great job with what it does. It's a best of breed for retention, disposal, and records management, etc. But it does work very nicely with Office 365 and Azure services. So the shortcomings of the product, or how we can extend it further, what we've done is we've used streaming analytics to achieve that. So quite literally, this product has many different data sets, many different people that log on, and many different functions that they perform. In the end, everything that happens is generates an event, and no different to most applications or most things we work with. They either generate a log file or an event. So the secret then is to get those events that are being generated, port them into something that makes sense, or grab your log file, interrogate that, and cut it up. And then just like I showed you at the start, we can move those events as a service into an event hub for streaming analytics. So this is why we created that application to start with, is to show you that value proposition of moving that data. Now in a real world application, we've got a number of things that we do with with Content Manager, and whether it be doing a count of who's logging on to what database, or whether it's looking at what assignees have changed, or what records have been checked out, etc. The ability to take those events and then produce rules around them is really powerful. So that's a quick view of Content Manager. Okay, that was too quick. I wanted to. Just let me flip my slides. So let's go back to our streaming analytics blades and have a look at the job that's actually running that live event process. But having seen it built once, it probably makes a bit more sense now, except in this scenario with our queries, we've got a number of queries that perform rules-based functions on the same set of ingesting events. So based upon the needs, we can do different things. If I go to queries, and this is running, so I can't stop it. So we are sending some of this data to function apps. We are sending some data to Cosmos DB for different analysis. We are sending some to Power BI, and we're sending some to other events tables. So we send this data into a bunch of different paths to be able to perform functionality. So the crux of this, and whether you're into managing data or whether you're into playing in the Azure portal as such, from a business perspective and from a process perspective, this is about changing or turning something which is manual human based into an event-driven, event-based situation. So if for example, I needed to physically go and click on something or act on something to actually get that process happening or to make things work, if we can recognize that that's an event and take that event and then react to it automatically or transparently, and then actually act on that event in a number of ways, then all of a sudden, we're really looking at a more automated type of process. And the more we can automate a process, the faster it gets, the more efficient we become, the smarter we are. So this is our content manager having events being fed into streaming analytics. And this makes probably a bit more sense rather than the last demonstration, because we have people logging off, we have content being added, objects, containers being changed, and this data here, there's a bunch of details that we can use. It has dates. We can determine what IP addresses people are actually using the applications from. We can tell what the base objects are that are being used, and we can tell about what relationships they have. So all of this data is the basic set of event metadata that we need to be able to produce a bunch of rules settings. For those of you won't understand this probably, but because we have different content managed data sets, we identify those differently. So quite literally, I can say who is logging on to what data set, how many times per day or hour versus another one. Now, once we saw that other query that was used for that first example, I think you can see that the sky is very much the limit. A good way to visualize all this is to come and look at our job diagram. I love this. So quite literally, this is actually a live representation of data being fed into our streaming analytics. And you can see we've got two different input sources. But as an input source here, I've got a query and then I've got an output. Right, so this particular one here, event comes in. We have this concept of assigning a record to someone. So as an event, we recognize that an assignee has been changed on a record. We then come across and we send that data to a function app, and the function app will then produce an adaptive card in a new format and send that to Teams. Right, so that is one process where we identify the need of an event type or an event condition, and then we act on that. And that's just a rule. And we can have 100 of these rules. Find a record type. So there are scenarios that we need to be able to say, hey, this was a record in the content manager system, and we need to know if it is a training material type, because if it is, and it's a new one, we need to then run through an approval process and take that material into our training portal for general consumption. So Cosmos DB, this is a storage area where we can actually do some analytics. So quite literally, how many times is everyone logging on and who are the heavy users of the system. So we can do further analytics by porting this data through to there. Update training, event monitoring. And this is just a sample. There's more rules that we have, but it's just quite simple to look at that. And that for me is really the best visualization of streaming analytics. One of those pathways, and as I said, I mean, let's talk for a second about the development of a card that actually gets put into a channel of a team. You know, if you think back a couple of years and say, how do we do that? How do we actually take a representation of data into something that actually looks quite good, and then automate that into a team-based IM channel? Really, you'd be bashing your head against a wall to try and make that work. Now, it's not super simple, but it's definitely achievable, and it's a lot easier. And this is an adaptive card as a format. The same card format in adaptive technology, I can actually send to just about any IM channel, including emails. We already saw our own Power BI that we created. For us, it's the same. As data changes through that pipeline, through those events, our Power BI representations are live. They change as per that data. And I'm getting to a point where I've pretty much talked it out. And I think that's been okay. We've got a real world sample of how to actually take something which is static, which are just events, then have those into a streaming analytics or a pipeline where we can then make a bunch of rules and actually provide some automation and improve processes. And that's what we're always about, isn't it? It's about taking existing things and making it better. So look, I'm going to call that as it is and see if there's any questions or if there's any feedback on that. This link on the page, that does take you to the Microsoft Docs spot for streaming analytics, and there's a bunch of samples there. That one I actually set up and ran. It is on that link. So, you know, if you're keen, go and have a play with it. It's really fun. It's fun to sort of start from start to end with a result that's live in the space of a short period of time. Very rewarding. The docs.microsoft.com, they used to be a bit flaky, but in the last couple of years, that's become phenomenal. That's the amount of information that you can get from docs.microsoft.com. So any of those objects that I showed you in that Azure space and that stack, it's all there, and it's being updated continually. And it's a wealth of information, samples, links to code if you want to play with it, etc. So yeah, that's how I'm going to finish this off. Hopefully you've understand a bit more about streaming analytics, how it fits in the Azure stack, and if you've got a better understanding of the capabilities of those sort of services, then you can perhaps apply that back to the problems that you might be having, or maybe thinking about, well, what if we could do something a little differently? Let me think back to that streaming analytics presentation. You know what? We might be able to, bang, bang, bang. You know, maybe you want to do a feed of Twitter feeds, and then in that pipeline of doing Twitter feed work, you do some cognitive analysis to read the body of a Twitter feed and say, was it positive or was it negative? You know, all things are possible. All right, I'm done. So I'm going to throw it back to my wonderful director.
We don't have any questions at this stage, Errol.
Excellent. I can't get tripped up then.
But thank you. That was really interesting. Thanks for putting that together, and the presentation. It was great.
No worries. Have a great day, everyone, and take care.